that we all want something. We have goals, we have things that we believe are important, but we struggle to focus on them.
Yeah, well, there's a couple different things. I think the first thing is that we hold ourselves back from is we have a lot of fears. And fears, when you really start to dive into them, like you mentioned in the beginning of this, like I started talking with you about like the East, and you started, I remember you told me in 2017, like you should read the Bhagavad Gita. So I literally wrote it, like, I got it like the next week and read it while we were traveling. And so there was that, and as I was writing the book, I was like, what's the thing? Because the original title of the book was The Psychology of Taking Action. Because I was looking at the Mindset Mentor podcast, I have 1,400 episodes, and I was like, it's just me speaking for almost every single one of them. And I was like, what do I teach? Like, what do people want from me? And I was like, it's almost all like tips and tricks to understand yourself to take action. Because everybody who's listening to a podcast has the awareness of, I want to improve, I want to get better, I want something different, but how do I do it? And so I started saying, okay, if taking action is what the book's going to be about, like, why don't people take action in the first place? And one of the things that pops up for people is fear. Like there's some sort of fear that pops up for them. And I had a conversation with one of my friends who went and lived in the tribe with a tribe, a native Brazilian tribe in the middle of Brazil. And so he had to fly into a town, he had to hop on a boat and go for 2 days on a boat in the middle of nowhere. And he started talking to me about these things that he called primal fears and intellectual fears. So like a primal fear is pain or death is attached to it. And we don't really come up with too many primal fears in our life nowadays. Intellectual fear is like what we deal with all day long, which is, you know, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, the fear of not being accepted, the fear of success. We all have these fears, and all of these fears are made up in our minds. And so I was listening to, I'm pretty sure it was Sadhguru I was listening to. And I was like, I put on, and I was driving around in Sedona as I was writing the book. I was there just to try to get my whole mind together. I was by myself writing it. And I was like looking at fears and trying to figure them out. And one thing that he said that like really hit me more than anything else is, okay, I've identified my fears. And the next thing is, well, how do I overcome these fears? And if it's an intellectual fear, the fears that exist in our minds is you can't overcome something that doesn't exist. And so we basically wake up in the morning, we create the boogeyman, which is like the fear of success, the fear of failure, whatever it is. And instead of actually taking the action that we need to and focusing on what it is that we want, we take all of our focus and put it towards trying to overcome this fear, when in reality, the fear doesn't even exist in the first place. And so I think the biggest thing for most people is like, the fear is keeping you from focusing. But there's also like the identity of who you think you are. And one of my favorite things is challenging who I think I am all the time. Like I love the story, and I put in the book, of Jim Carrey when he decided to be in Man on the Moon. And the Man on the Moon was a movie where he ended up playing Andy Kaufman. And there was a whole documentary that was done on this, and they curbed it for like 20 years because it was so off the rails of how crazy he went. And what he did was it's a documentary called Jim and Andy that's on him playing the role on Man on the Moon. So Andy Kaufman was a guy who was once alive. And the crazy part about Andy Kaufman is he also played other characters. So it was Jim Carrey playing Andy Kaufman, who played like Tony Clifton and other characters. But the thing that happened with him was that he would never break character. So he was a method actor. So for 4 months, he played as this real life person. And even to the point where his driver that would pick him up in Hollywood and drive him to his house said that whoever he was playing at the time that they stopped recording, whether it was Andy Kaufman, Tony Clifton, he would play that person the entire day when he was driving him home that night, and he'd pick him up and he was still the same person, not Jim Carrey anymore. And so what happened was he ended up like, and it gets kind of crazy, where he ends up doing therapy sessions with Andy Kaufman's real daughter and his family to like help them overcome his sudden death. And so what happens is they stopped recording 4 months later, and he's like, I don't know who I am. And he lost who he was. And he's like, I don't know my beliefs. I don't know what makes me happy, what makes me sad, what pisses me off anymore. He's like, I've kind of just lost who Jim Carrey is. And that's kind of like his spiritual awakening that you've seen him go through over the past 20 years. And he realized, if I can lose Jim Carrey, then who the hell is Jim Carrey? And he realized that Jim Carrey is just basically a character that he's playing all the time that is completely somebody else, and he could just wake up another morning and act like he's somebody else. And so I think that two of the things that really keep us from focusing on stuff is we get really afraid and fearful of making change or judgment or failure and all that. And the other thing is like who we actually truly think we are will hold us back from taking either the action that we need to, or staying in the exact same position that we're in.
I love that. I want to go down both of those routes because I find them both fascinating for different reasons. And I want to go down that more spiritual, ethereal journey as
Let's
well.
do it.
Because but before we do that, I want to make sure that, so if we talk about the fears, you made me remember a C.S. Lewis statement that says, you don't have a soul, you are the soul, and you have a body.
Yeah.
And I remember I used to have that written on a little post-it note, and I used to look at it every day first thing in the morning, because I was thinking about this concept of identity, that the first thing 99% of us do when we wake up first thing in the morning is we look in the mirror. Usually we say something like, oh, I look tired, or don't like that spot, or God, I put on weight, God, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden we're already in the bodily concept of life, this bodily consciousness. And now you live your whole day thinking about the body. What does the body need? The body needs food, etc. And that's natural. Like, that's not unnatural. That's normal. Like, I do that too. But then you're saying that at the same time, you've got to nurture and nourish and connect with this deeper sense. How do you balance the two in a real world where you have responsibilities, you have bills, you have things to do that are connected to the body, but then at the same time we're like, but you're not this body. So how do you balance, how do you make sense of these two seemingly opposite pursuits? Yeah,
I mean, the thing that I think I would have thought 5 or 10 years ago was that the more that I get into spiritual development, the less motivated I'll become, or the less I will want to achieve. That hasn't gone away in any sort of way. But what I have found is that I achieve through a place of it's more like I'm not white knuckling my way through life anymore. I can take action and not be so wrapped up in my fears and my limiting beliefs. And so it's not like I'm in the world and of the world at the same time, where it's like the soul is here, and as I'm speaking to you, everything that I say is also something that I struggle with every single day. I have not mastered this process.
Me too.
There'll be times where I find myself just so in the world, and I'm just like stressed. There's things happening. There's this business where there's all of this, we've got employees, we're hiring people, there's stuff happening. And then I just take a step back and I'm like, it's just like kind of like a game. Like, take a second. Like, it's all real. I'm not saying it's not true. It's not reality. It's not in front of you. It's all there. But behind it all, if I can connect to like a deeper sense that's within me and in the soul that I feel is in there, I'm like, hey man, chill out for a second. Like, it's really not that big of a deal, right? Most things, there are definitely some things that are big deals in people's lives, and there's deaths, and there's things that people have to, be in control of and be able to pay bills and all that stuff. All of those are real and they're definitely necessary. But behind it all, you're still there.
Yeah.
And there's this thing that if I can take myself back and kind of like out of my own head and kind of into my heart, which has been a big journey for me, because I'm so analytical and was never really taught like feelings and how to feel and process emotions. But if I can take myself out of my head and into my heart, what I've always found is that my head is always projecting itself into the future, or sometimes projecting itself into the past. But most for me, like if I sit down and meditate sometimes, it's like all of my to-do list, all of the things that I have to do, and it's projecting itself into the future. So my brain is always somewhere else. My body, it's always here. And so when I notice myself get stressed, I notice myself get anxious, I notice myself, whatever feelings I might be feeling, if I can take a couple deep breaths and kind of get back into my body, I'm like, it's not that bad. Like you have overcome so many things in your life. You'll figure out a way to get through it. And so what I've found is that it's not that I don't take the action. It's not that I'm not wanting to achieve more and more things and be able to have more fun and do all of this stuff in the external world. But when I find myself kind of take a step back and kind of be in my heart, it makes it a lot easier. I'm not like white knuckling and forcing my way through life. It's almost like I'm allowing life to happen through me. And I don't know how it works, and I don't pretend to be smart enough, but things start happening around me that help me in the process of getting to wherever it is that I actually want to truly go.
Yeah, and I think when I'm listening to you, there's this feeling that, I feel like I agree with you. I think everyone is a creator. I do believe that creativity flows when we connect with that. But I think sometimes we feel so distracted from it.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to pull out our phone. It's so much easier to put on a show in the background. It's so much easier to do all of these. It's so much easier to do all those things at the same time.
Yeah.
Like now we're no longer ever with one person. We're with one person. We're both on our phones. and we're watching a show at the same time, and we got our laptops doing work. So you've literally got 3 screens in front of you, 5 screens in total, and there's so much distraction, right? We know that. How does a person possibly, and I say this out of like compassion and empathy, because it's like, it requires so much from us.
Right.
Because everything around us is built for distraction. The foods we're eating, the things we drink and consume, the stuff that's created around us, it's all to distract.
Yeah.
So you're fighting like almost what feels to a lot of people like a losing battle.
Right.
What do you do to pick yourself back up?
I mean, what's more important than that? You know, like what's more important than connecting to your true self, to working on yourself? Like, why am I so hardcore in mindset? Because I know how many people are so wrapped up in their mindset and their thoughts and their beliefs and their patterns that they're stuck in. And what ultimately we all want, I think, is freedom. And the way to get through to that freedom is to work on yourself, whatever that looks like for whatever stage someone is in, you know, and I can have empathy for every person at every stage because I've been through so many stages of my process. And I think that it comes back to like, why are you doing it? What do you want? If you're trying to disconnect from your phone, why? You know, like for me, like I recently deleted Instagram from my phone. I did it last year for a month, felt like it was amazing. The book came out and I was like, I gotta get back on. I gotta promote. I gotta make sure things are good. I recently just deleted it again. And now everything that I post, everything flows through my team. So it's not like it's just gone. It's just now I just happen to flow, everything flows through my team. Why did I do that though? Was because I don't want to live my life on that phone. And that one thing that I noticed is that Instagram was one of the things where I would pick it up and I would just somehow get to it. And I wasn't even thinking about getting to it. And I was like, my life is not this little tiny thing. My life is everything that's out here. And so why did I delete it? Was because I actually want to be in everything. I want to be present with my wife. When we have children, I want to be present with our children. I want to be the most present version of myself as I possibly can. And I can't imagine that I'll get to the end of my life, be 100 years old and be like, I wish I would have spent more time on Instagram. I wish I would have spent more time watching Netflix. You know, I've been addicted to all of those things. I'm not, above any of this stuff. But I started looking at myself and saying like, is this helping me get to where I want to be in life? Is it creating more peace in my life? For me, it was creating way more stress. So it was perpetuating these feelings that I'm trying to let go of and trying to work with. And so for me, I think what's important to people is like, if you want to make a change, why do you want to make the change? And for me, looking at a screen is not as important as actually physically being in front of my wife and giving her what she actually truly deserves, which is 100% of my attention. Because there's been times where I've not given her 100% of my attention. And as we start to have kids and stuff, I don't want to be a distracted parent. I want to be with them. I'll never sit there and go, well, when my kids were children, like I wish I would have spent more time on Instagram. I wish I would have spent more time watching Netflix. I just think for me, like the level of the place I'm at in my life is I want to be as present as possible because I've worked for things, I've climbed ladders, I've gotten to different places. I've realized none of those things fulfilled me in any sort of way. And this journey I've been on in the past, 10 years, 7 years ago, when we started talking about the Bhagavad Gita and I started meditating a whole lot more and getting into it, I realized, these things are bringing me peace. And the more peaceful I feel, the more that it becomes easy to actually achieve and create the stuff that I want to in life. And so for me, the presence and the peace at this point in my life, things might change. I don't know what it's going to be in 5 years, are actually the things that are the most important to me. Yeah,
it's so interesting. I think we feel like being anxious and being, kind of like busy and stuff will actually create the most effectiveness.
Right.
But what you just said, this idea of if you start from a place of peace, and I think about that, I completely agree with that. If you walk into something with stillness, it gives you clarity, it gives you perspective, you can zoom out, you can zoom in. If you're buzzing around and moving around, you lose all of that. It's all blurry and fuzzy. And I want to ask you, what's